Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Gear. Today I have with me Mr. Tim Lewis from TL Pedals Canada. And Tim was gracious enough to join me in a virtual chat to talk about his pedals and basically give us a little bit more insight on the magic that he puts together in these little boxes. Tim sent me this pedal, which is the Honker Overdrive. And, before getting the pedal and taking a look at it, I didn't know much about the Honker pedal other than it was loosely based on a tube screamer circuit. But, after playing the pedal and having a chance to put it through its paces, I'm really enjoying it. It's hard for me to stop playing the pedal because I find it's like so much better than a regular tube screamer, in my opinion. Maybe Tim, you can tell me a little bit more about how the pedal came about.
Well, I mean, it comes from finding things that I don't like or finding things that other people complain about. And honestly, a lot of the things that I've developed or things that I've adjusted or changed have been a result of people making suggestions or comments. And I can usually take pretty good criticism and understand that, hey, if this helps make things better, then it's good for everyone. And the idea with this was to build on some of the modifications that are pretty popular for the tube screamers. Um, there's a number of different versions of like factory built ones, and there's countless versions of boutique builders, and like a lot of them are using some of the same sort of things just because it's a soft clipping feedback loop type op amp based uh, audio effect. So it's a pretty common circuit, which has many variants. The idea with this one was to build on the Love Pedals stripped down tube screamer, which I would have at one point in time. I think there's one over here that Brielle had painted. Sorry about that. There's an enclosure Brielle had painted up like with finger paints when she was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, and I had just built a Eternity Booster or the Eternity Burst Love Pedal clone to see how that compared to a tube screamer at the time. And there's like pink sparkles and everything in this here, so this is full on. And I liked how it sounded. It sounded different on every guitar, which, unlike a tube screamer like the Ibanez, it kind of has that standard sound
Yeah,
because of the input and the output buffers, which this doesn't have.
that's one thing that I noticed about the pedal right away is that for me, it just has more. It has I don't know how I can put this, but it's got more bottom end to it. It's got more gain to it. It's got a lot more variation in tone. And that's even before we go into the switch, right? So what I really like about the pedal is that I was using it as a boost at one point, and then of course if you want to have gain, you can have plenty of gain on tap. Which I always felt that for me a tube screamer, like a lot of people love tube screamers. For me, I always felt like, yeah, it's okay. It's good to boost, your amplifier, but it's not a well-rounded pedal, even though it's probably one of the most popular pedals that there is. I've bought and sold them a couple of times, always with, either it didn't have enough gain or, it didn't have enough fullness to it or whatever. But this one is quite different. I almost felt like the name Honker Overdrive was doing the pedal a misservice because people are thinking, well, nobody wants a honky sound, right? So how did you come up with the name for it?
It's kind of ironic because like the first generation of my version was actually really honky. I was working with a like a rhythm and blues player
Yeah.
who he liked I don't know, just different sort of gear, and he was helping me fine tune the tone circuit. I wouldn't say that's why I called it the honker, because I think I had at that point in time working with a friend of mine who did graphic design and like caricatures. He's the one who came up with the little Canada Goose sort of design.
Yeah.
But I wanted something essentially that sounded Canadian, so that was the Canada Goose idea.
Well, I like the
Honker or no
goose.
honker.
I like the goose. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot. It reminds me of almost like the Looney Tune character there, but it's pretty cool. And,
Yeah.
and and one thing I have to say is like the unit does seem extremely well built. Now, you were mentioning earlier on that the other pedal you were just holding up was painted by someone. I assume that's your daughter.
Yeah, that's my daughter Brielle. She's been kind of part of the trip all along. When she was really, really young, I mean, she'd be hanging around me watching TV or iPad, whatever, while I'm building these sort of things. And I spilt a tray of capacitors, and I told her I'd pay her to sort them. So that was kind of the beginning of that, and it
Right.
gave her a little way to earn a few bucks
Sure.
and help out a little bit and learn at the same time. So yeah, now, I mean, she has two of her own pedals that she
Awesome.
builds with some assistance from me, um, that she keeps the money from, and that motivates her to keep doing it, and it gives her something real, you know, valuable to do with her time and her hands, and people seem to like them too, which is kind of cool. She's turning 10 here very soon.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, somebody so young getting into the art and the science, I guess, of building pedals. Does she play any instruments, or is her love strictly for electronics?
She has a guitar,
That's
and
cool.
she has used it to test the pedals on. But she's a busy girl, man. She does girl stuff, right? Like
Sure,
she's
sure.
got a big doll house, and she makes little videos of her dolls in the doll house, and she is now back to school too, right? So
Really cool.
it's uh it's something like her and I have spent a lot of our time together, like even on the weekends and evenings and stuff, just doing stuff together and going out in the woods and fishing and stuff, and that gets my wife a bit of a break too, and we
Sure,
can both go out and do something and just leave her to have some quiet time or
absolutely.
whatever she does.
Well, whenever you can get the kids involved in whatever it is that you have a passion for, I think it's really great. I mean, today it's hard enough to get kids to just pick up an instrument. Never mind, building guitar pedals. So that's pretty amazing if you ask me. I've tried building pedals from kits, and I can vouch that it's not an easy thing if you don't if you don't really have a knack for electronics. It's kind of like finding your way in the woods. But I did build two pedals. They do work. I don't know if they're the best, but I built one called the Brown Sound in a Box. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And I built another one, which is kind of the Screddy lunar lander circuit, which is kind of like a fuzz kind of slash distortion pedal, which I thought were pretty nice sounding kits. But they weren't easy to build for me. I'm like, I'm all thumbs when it comes to electronics and capacitors and all that kind of stuff. So I can follow the schematics and I can follow the instructions pretty well, but I wouldn't know my my butt from my elbow if I had to design something from scratch. So, how did you actually get into all of this? I mean, did you just feel that there was something lacking, or did you just find that there was an opportunity to maybe start a business, or what inspired you to start doing this?
Um, Not so much the business aspect of it, although it's beginning to kind of turn that way. Um, I I enjoy building stuff. I enjoy taking a bunch of like raw materials or fixing things and making something better or making something good.
Hmm.
It's pretty rewarding, especially you plug it in and it actually works the first time, which is, I don't know, I love that sense of accomplishment. But I think I had played bass all through high school and went to college. Was still kind of playing bass, but I had moved to go to college. and I had built a bass preamp out of some parts from Radio Shack, which I don't even think they sell parts like that anymore, but they used to. And it buzzed like crazy, but it was really rewarding to actually put something together. And at the time, I was working as an aircraft mechanic, and I made up an enclosure like completely all riveted together out of aircraft aluminum. So, it was something that kind of crossed a bit of my interest in music and my profession at the time with sheet metal, dealing with aluminum and all the electronics side of it as well. So that's kind of where it all started, I guess. But I've been soldering stuff since I was probably too young to be soldering.
Well, that's a good way to start. I mean, the thing is, I mean, today with so many different, I guess, import very inexpensive pedals that you can get from China or wherever, where you can get a pedal for $30, $40 sometimes. How does somebody get a grip on starting a business or just getting things out there to be able to compete with these things? I would assume that it's not an easy thing. You have to, you have to try and capture lightning in a bottle and get really lucky. And like the Tube Screamer, I mean, it's a great pedal. A lot of people do like it. How do you improve upon something like that? I mean, you obviously did with this. I mean, I like this a lot better than my Tube Screamer. But is it luck? Is it skill? Is it a combination of things? What's your opinion on that?
It's funny you brought that up because I was talking to another fellow on Instagram or messaging him back and forth the other day. I think his name is JFet Life. And I don't know him from a hole in the ground, but I noticed some of the comments he made were like a little bit negative about something. I think he was starting to maybe get ahead of himself in, building them or getting too many parts on hand and not letting it kind of grow organically for him. And we were back and forth a couple times about that, and it kind of put into perspective for me if I could have talked to myself 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah,
And it really isn't about the business sort of thing at all. I really 100% believe that it's about the people. Like I went to meet a local guy today that he wanted a certain design made, and it was probably a 2 month meeting in the making, where he wanted just a one-off clone type thing of a certain design. And I was like, oh yeah, sure, I can do this, and just put it in a blank box, and that's the end of it. The problem is for me, is it takes probably 3 or 4 times the amount of time to do something just one off than it does to develop a design,
of course. Yeah,
make it make it versatile, which I
sure.
try to do with most of my designs, so that like the honker, you can use it as a booster or an overdrive or even a distortion,
Yeah,
like full up.
yeah.
And so yeah, I kind of worked out a bit of a deal with him that I would develop this, what turned into the Canata, which we just posted today. It's a love pedal church of tone style circuit, which isn't really anything special in itself. It's just a regular booster style single stage booster circuit. But what they used in the church of tone was just like a clipping section on the output of it, which allows it to have fairly clean headroom, but still clip when you drive it, instead of just get louder and louder and louder. It clips very pleasantly. They had developed a two-stage, sorry, not a two-stage booster. I think it's the Chula, TCHULA, for Josh Smith, who I've just recently been introduced to his playing, and it's pretty cool. I understand now why he's becoming so popular. And so it's just basically a booster with clipping diodes on the output. So it does have a fairly high headroom, so it's quite clean. It'll get louder, but it'll still start to clip if you drive it. just naturally like you'd have a tube amp sitting in front of you. And then it has a second switch with it that allows you to switch between the just the regular bias on the transistor and a second set of biasing components so that you can actually have it as like a drive channel on your amp.
So it sounds like it could be pretty flexible for somebody who just wants to have a little extra. I mean, do most of your pedals stem from, pre-existing designs and you just figure you could make them better, and so you start with, let's say, a very similar circuit and then just go from there?
Yeah, for the most part, anything that's transistor or op amp based is all developed right from the data sheet from whatever that component is. And the values are selected based on the amount of gain you want out of it or the audio pass of the frequencies going through it or coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm thinking about doing something different, um, generally I start with some rudimentary building blocks that I know are proven, that are going to be fundamentally sound electronically, so they don't, you know, introduce a whole bunch more noise into the amplifier or cause any weird electrical problems. Like, I'm sure you've stepped up to the microphone before and got a shock in your lips. Like,
Sure.
that's not pleasant.
No.
So we want to do what we need to do to prevent those sort of things from happening.
I'm sure you probably, look at a bunch of other pedals that are on the market today with a very different eye than maybe I would. What's exciting you in the market today?
I wish I could rewind 50 years ago and be the one that designed and developed like the deluxe Memory Man or something
Sure.
like that. That was like
Absolutely.
back when you could get really good analog stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
from Japan, American
Absolutely.
made stuff that really, I mean, it cost a lot because it took a long time to build. And back to your question you said earlier about, people looking at it as the business side of it, or to try to make it profitable. I believe it's just pure hard work. I have some pretty long days. I work till midnight just about every night because that's just how I do it. And I just try to make sure that what I send to people, I would be happy to receive myself. And if they do have a problem with it, especially if they do have a problem with something right away, because electronic components do occasionally fail, just
Sure.
quality control.
Yeah.
So, you can have a mechanical switch and something actually comes apart inside. It
Yeah.
could be a quality switch, but one out of 100 might have a burr or something inside of it. So, if they do have a problem, I will literally stop whatever I'm doing and get that fixed and sent back out in most cases this same day. If they have to ship it back to me, I'll try to get it sent right back out the same day or the following morning, so that I'm just doing the best I can for customer service, or for what I would hope to get if I was asking somebody to do the same for me.
You specifically talk about on your website how, your background in aeronautics, I guess, distilled in you the idea of redundancy and using quality parts and making sure things don't fail. So can you tell me a little bit about that, and what you did with this particular pedal, or maybe some of your other pedals?
So from the foot switch would probably be the most vulnerable part on the pedal, at least as far as, a moving part that gets wear and tear. So all the foot switches I use, either E switches or alpha switches, are rated at 30,000 cycles. So to put that into perspective, if you're playing twice a week and practicing once a week, that works out to be about 7.5 years. And if they're rated at 30 cycles, generally they're overrun double that to have it. So that's basically 15 years for a regular gigging musician or weekend warrior, so to speak,
Yeah,
that these just should last.
sure, I get it. Yeah,
The enclosures aren't just the thinnest and cheapest enclosures. They are aluminum, so they're not as strong as steel, but it's a type of cast aluminum, which, I mean, you've picked up cheap pedals before, I'm sure, like either those plastic shelled ones or thinner aluminum ones with different sort of sections to it. This is pretty standard for people like me to use, but I try to get them powder coated professionally and UV printed so that the printing's not just going to rub off.
Sure.
Powder coating, I'm not sure if people understand how that works, but it's in most cases like a plastic powder that's charged and then baked on. So it's almost like a really hard, thin layer of plastic around the outside of the aluminum. So it's stuck on there pretty good because it's baked. The knobs, I mean, you can feel the knobs. The knobs are solid aluminum. They're not going to strip if you turn the screws, like the little set screws inside. They're not going to strip on you like they would in a plastic knob. And I'm pretty sure, I haven't done it yet, but I'm pretty sure I could drive over one of these pedals with my truck and it still would probably work fine. So
It reminds me a lot of the old MXR pedals, and those things lasted forever. I mean, you can still find them today working fine, and you can pitch them and hit the drummer when he's getting carried away with a drum solo or something, and you can still keep on playing with the pedals, which is great to see. Do you think it's actually possible to build something like a Memory Man or something like that today? That kind of quality, that kind of, let's say, attention to detail, and make it affordable.
I think a company like Electro Harmonics has done probably one of the best attempts at finding that middle ground so any player can get into whatever design they're working on if they really want it. It's not like out of touch completely. And the functionality of it is really good. So where I'm at, just to try to take a baby step forward in what I do is for the Honker, for example, I've designed uh, surface mount circuit board and sent them off. And I'm working with two different manufacturers to try to get the circuit boards populated and assembled for me so that I can reduce the time it takes for me. And then I can just basically work with final assembly testing and quality control and have that available, but also still do what I do fundamentally, wire up, put every through
Yep.
hole component in place. And that's the fine line. It's like more large scale manufacturers have big, huge assembly lines and pick and place machines and their own department for powder coating and artwork and
Right.
graphics and printing.
Right.
Um, to take a baby step forward and to try to offer that so I can reduce the time it takes me and in turn offer something that might be a little bit more affordable for people that want to give something different a try.
Makes a lot of sense. I would assume that you never really finish, right? I mean, you come out with something like this, and maybe you get comments from people that you've sent them to, or your friends or fellow musicians or whatever. When do you say, okay, look, it's cast in stone, I'm not changing it anymore? Or do you just find yourself tempted to go on and make version 2 or version 3? Or
I think some people have a real hard time with that. I'm not one of them. If I believe the honker you're holding would be generation 2.2, and there was a change to 2.3, and then the surface mount is now 3.1. So there's been very few changes.
how does the TL808 differ in terms of this? Is the TL more true to the original 808, or was that sort of the first incarnation before you ended up doing this one?
So believe it or not, there are TL808s around that are like they're green. They were powder coated, but they were actually labeled and clear coated with peel and stick labels from Walmart or Michael's craft store back in the day. So it did kind of start off as like the TL808 was a modified version of the 808, but it has the input and the output buffer. Guys that are very purist about the 808 would gravitate towards that, and the honker is quite different. Now, The 808 has the similar AMZ Fat mod, which is pretty popular. It has a gain mod with the pot, so it gives it quite a bit more gain than the stock 808. Mine has the selectable clipping section, so you can have a crunch style clipping or stock clipping, or
Right.
just use it as a booster with the clipping bypass as well.
When you started off designing your pedals, which of the pedals that you have in your current lineup is sort of the one that's been around the longest?
I would say probably either the Rat or the 808. They both would have been one of the earlier designs that I had continued making. I know the Rat is almost a shameless ripoff, but it is from the specs that were used in the early woodcutter versions from the early 80s. And I actually had one of those. My demo's still on my YouTube channel. The shootout between my Rat with the switchable clipping and the original 83 woodcutter black, what do you call it? I think it's called a blackface Rat with the white letters and the actual Proco logo on it.
Right,
And
right.
I mean, for me, I just at the time couldn't justify owning a $350
Yeah,
vintage guitar pedal. So yeah, the idea for me was how do I make something like this? Because this sounds awesome. My ears hurt for 3 days because I've been playing this for so long.
that's always a good sign when you go start developing early tinnitus because you can't put it down. Uh, and you also mentioned on your website, I thought that was pretty interesting that you originally did offer a silver pony, which is I guess a clone of a Klon. You also had the King Klon Dual Overdrive, but you no longer offer those pedals. And you mentioned on your website you decided to do that after you had a conversation with Bill Finnegan. I guess a lot of people know who he is, or if you don't know who he is, just look up the history on the Klon, and you'll soon figure out that he's basically the man who's developed probably the most sought after, most expensive pedal around. Um, so how did that conversation go? I mean, what changed your mind about offering those pedals?
Well, it started. I started off with a an unpleasant email from Reverb that there was while I was on vacation that there was a copyright infringement case opened against me
Oh boy.
on my King Klon,
Okay.
and that was about, and that my listing was suspended.
Okay.
So um, I assumed it was because of the Klon, but in
Sure.
my cautious nature, I asked for clarification just because maybe somebody had a problem with me comparing it to the King of Tone and
Sure.
Analog Man, or maybe somebody from who is it, Warner Brothers, the King Kong thing,
Oh
and
yeah, that
I
could be.
was just
Sure.
wanting clarification for specifically what their problem with my product was, because I didn't want to just throw it away.
Sure.
And I had still had them listed on my website, and I still had listed locally on Kijiji and just different things like that for people to see. And they came back and said it was Klon LLC is it opened the case, and it's for copyright violation of the use of Klon, which they apparently own. So I thought that was really weird because at that point I was under the impression that they had shut down building Klons, and I could not find any source of new Klon KTRs, the sideways smaller version there that
Mm-hmm.
was surface
Yeah.
mount. Um, and so I had felt at the time, I mean, I had been building clones for quite a long time in enclosures that I had just bought like a Klon knockoff enclosure and then populated it with my own parts. So, in a roundabout way, I had gone online to do some research because Reverb didn't want to get involved in trying to mitigate type of agreement or royalties or license agreement, anything like that. I tracked down Bill Finnegan through eBay and found out he was building them again since last February 2019, which I had restarted again building pedals in March last year, 2019. And it was a dilemma to start building clones again because I did feel like this was something very unique to him. And I did reach out to him, and he was super cool, very kind and understanding, and very open about things. Um, he just shared with me a little bit of the history of the clone, how much effort and time they put into selecting the components for them, designing the circuit. And I told him, like, I was under the impression you had stopped building them, and I know there's a lot of people out there, ripping off your design, and I'm not going to be one of them. I definitely want to be on the good with the other people in the industry, especially somebody as influential as he is.
Sure. Well, that's a very noble thing for you to do. I mean, I think a lot of other builders would probably just have said, "Okay, I won't use the Klon name, and I'll still, build a circuit, and eventually the word gets out of, basically what it's built, what it's based on." But I find that's very noble of you to respect that of him. God knows there's a lot of other companies from Wampler to whoever that are offering that type of pedal circuit. I wonder if it's just going to become like the next Tube Screamer, where everybody sort of has their version of that pedal because it's so popular.
That could be the case. I know there are a lot of people with their own versions of it, and I still have a few left. I'm not just going to throw them all in the garbage because they are very, very well built and very good components in it. But it is a circuit that is very, very unique to itself. It has building blocks in it, but it's something that's been very finely tuned. And even my Silver Pony, which was my modified version of it, it has some very subtle tweaks to it. Just again, it is in many cases about fine tuning. The honker compared to a Love Pedal Eternity Booster, it has some subtle changes, but it does make it perform quite different.
So when you actually did come out with your Silver Pony or the King Klon, did you actually have an opportunity to A/B it with a real one because they're so hard to come by, or was it just what you heard on videos or other things like that? How did you know when you were close enough?
For the most part, the only clones I've ever played and heard firsthand myself have been my own. I had developed it off of the publicized DIY community schematic that was confirmed two or three different places, and Bill had even mentioned that when I was back and forth with him, that somebody, they got together as a group of people, bought one of his pedals, degooped it, and then reverse engineered it. So it's it's a verified schematic. And then there's been other people that have done like shootouts with mine against the KTR, against other. I think it's the Mythic Mythical Overdrive or something like that is another one that somebody has done a video of mine against that. And then recently, Chris Chimia, I had posted it on, I think it was on my Instagram and on my website. He actually has a Klon Centaur, and he had bought one of my earlier versions of the Klon Centaur clone and my Silver Pony. And I don't know if it's, he had sent me the unlisted link, and I assume he was planning on making it public for people to hear it. But that was just recently that he had put that. So an actual clone centaur against my clone centaur and my silver pony. So it's pretty cool.
It really is. So do you still get a thrill? I mean, do you get a thrill when you see somebody playing your pedals and talking about how great they are? what kind of a rush do you get out of that?
The two things that I really enjoy about all of this, number one, when I finish building a pedal and I plug it in for the first time, turn it on, and it works, and then I play for a little while, just testing it, and then I generally leave my pedals plugged in overnight, just 12 to 24 hours, because if electronic parts fail, that's part of my testing procedure, just to make sure that it's not going to power down or in
Sure.
a short time. So yeah, the first time I plug one in and play it, and then when I see pedal boards there with my stuff on it, that's a pretty cool thing. Whether it's guys I know or whether it's guys I don't know, and somebody shared it. There was somebody had shared a picture of a pedal board celebrating Lawrence Petros, who's another pedal builder, makes really really good pedals. Um, they had shared a picture of their pedal board celebrating his birthday or something. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, I saw one of my pedals on there. I don't know if it was the Stinger or the Honker, and I was like, wow, so cool. That's like almost like third party affirmation, because I'm on the outside looking in and I'm part of
Sure.
the part of the show, right?
For sure, for sure. Well, I mean, and some of your other pedals, like the Angel Choir Chorus and the Blackface. Actually, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is the TL Lite 2020. That's an amp that you've worked on. So tell me a little bit about that. How did that come about? I mean, an amp is quite different from pedals. So how did you get to the next step with that?
I mean, there's two parts to that. I mean, there's the utilitarian part of that, where it's like I need an amplifier and I need to be able to practice or test pedals. Excuse me. I need that, right? But then there's the other side of it too, that hey, I could do this, and it's different because it's high voltage, but it was something that I wanted to do for a long time, and figured I would probably, get around to it. There's a lot of time goes into it, not to mention the cost of all the transformers and the tubes.
Absolutely.
I mean, anybody that's replaced the tubes in their amp, they know
Yep.
it's a few bucks just for the parts to do it, and then many hours of work. Um, for the 2020, I just kind of thought, with everything going on, it may not be something that I build a whole lot of, but to kind of tag it as that this year, it kind of marks that point in my pedal building career, electronics, amplifier, guitar, whatever you want to call it, um, marks that point in time that we all went through this together, because it is a pretty challenging thing for the world to adjust to.
Absolutely. 2020 is going to be remembered for a long time for many reasons, I think. It's good to see that you're putting a positive spin on it with this particular product, which is pretty cool. Is there any reason why you chose a Blackface deluxe circuit for the first amp?
Yeah, it is kind of funny. I didn't just build a champ or something like a lot of guys. For the first one, they just want a simple circuit. And
Yeah,
I if I was going to build an amp, I wanted to build something that I could use, and I didn't need reverb because I built a reverb pedal. I
right.
didn't need tremolo because I had a tremolo design, which I am reworking now. Um, and I talked to, again, Nathan Sanford. He's a local guy, easy to talk to. I sent him a text. Hey, I want to build an amp, man. You got some parts? He's like, oh, I think I'd be leading you down the wrong path if I gave you some amplifier parts. And after some back and forth, he's like, no, no, you want a Blackface Deluxe, like an early, like the 68 or
Sure,
65,
sure.
whatever,
Can't go
and
wrong
just
with
a
that.
stripped down version.
What do you see coming up in the near future for any other pedals or amps?
I think I'm going to try to re redesign some of my other designs, like the honker, into surface mount, and see where that goes, because I know through hole parts are more expensive. They're generally viewed as being better. Um, but if I can get more of my designs out there to people that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford one of my other pedals just because it takes so much time to
Yeah.
build them, and the parts, of course. But something that I've wrestled with time and here and there was there's got to be a good way to design a solid state amplifier as just a because solid state amplifiers are significantly less expensive than tube amplifiers.
Right.
They're lighter weight,
Yeah.
which makes it easier to ship, transport. You can still put a really good quality speaker in them, but I believe there's got to be a way to build a reasonably good solid state amplifier like the PV. There was a Redline PV
The Bandit.
Bandit. Yeah, the 112 Bandit.
It's a
One of the
great. That's a great
best
amp.
solid state amps ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a way to fill that niche somewhere where it's affordable, it's really good, and if you're running a pedal board anyway, there's no reason why you can't have a an amp simulator or can't have something that has like
Yeah.
our new Canada where there's a clipping threshold there. You can select how much headroom you want, and then the amplifier just simply increases the volume of that signal, and you can put a good speaker in it. The speaker is what's making the sound, right? It's what's moving the air. So that's probably something that I'm going to try to work on over the next couple of years to really fine tune that, because one of my struggles has always been, I've got this guitar, I got this amplifier, but I want this one. It's like, okay, I can put this much money with it, but I'm not sitting on $3,000 to go buy a hand wired point to point,
Absolutely.
20 single combo, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think right now, in terms of amplifiers, what a lot of people are after, and myself included, is that obviously amps are very expensive. For every one of those amps behind me, you're looking at quite a bit of money, and people like variety. They like to have things where they can get different sounds, make it portable, make it light, make it easy to use. But what I see as becoming a trend now is more and more people have a dilemma of whether or not they want to spend money on an amplifier, or they want to spend money on, let's say, a modeling system like a Kemper or an Axe-Fx or something like that. Because for the same amount of money, an Axe-Fx is not necessarily inexpensive, but I probably spent more on the Friedman that I have there, which gives me basically one sound than you can get from something like an Axe-Fx. So what I see probably happening in the future is probably people are going to kind of merge the two technologies, where they're going to say, okay, let's put together a transistor type amplifier where we can have a relatively flat speaker in it, like an FR system, that you use with an Axe-Fx or a Kemper, and maybe have the ability to load custom IRs in it, so that the speakers that are basically flat can emulate whatever you want, right? You could emulate different types of cabinets, different types of speakers within it, and if you can add an extra layer where you could even say, well, if I want to, I can actually then take the sound, mute the speaker, and basically go into my recording device silently. That would be beautiful. So then you have a speaker that you can use both in live situations, for recording. You're not limited to one sound. You can do multiple things with it if you could load in IRs. And I think people want flexibility. That being said, I don't know if you realize this, but a lot of musicians are very strange because they want innovation, but they don't want to go too crazy with it. Like, if you go too crazy with it, they're not going to accept it. So it's almost like, yeah, we want something new, but it's got to kind of be like what we already have. You know what I mean? So it's a fine line, I think, when you're trying to come up with new products.
One of the rudimentary things that I try to keep in the back of my mind when I'm building things is I want to make things that have intrinsic value in them. And what I mean by that is that by putting a clipping switch on one of my pedals, like the 808, let's say the TL808, it's got a three-way clipping switch, or the Rat, same sort of thing. So you have the stock settings when somebody gets tired of it, or if they go broke and they need some money and they need to sell it, it's then worth something more than just the stock modified version. If they get sick of it, they can flip the switch and all of a sudden the rat becomes a turbo rat. Or they can flick the switch and just use the rat or the TL808 as a clean boost. So for me, that intrinsic value of just adding that little bit more functionality to it um, means that, or at least I'm convinced that it means that they're going to have something else they can do with it if they lose interest. It keeps it on their pedal board. Or if they do come to the point where they have to sell it themselves, it has more value in it because I planned for it to have more value in it for their benefit if they need to come up with some money. So that's, I think, part of owning a good guitar is that it is an asset. It's more than just what you have sitting there that you might play once or twice a week, or you might you might only play once a year if it's a guitar that you either cherish, that you don't want to bring out very often, or
Sure.
one that you might not care for as much as one of your other ones. So yeah, I think in whether it's amplifiers or whether it's learning like DSP or the new tube technology or whatever it is for me, I think that's really important to me, and I think that I'm doing all of my customers a favor, whether they know it or not, in the long term, by trying to build in a little bit of intrinsic value for their benefit. Even the Silver Pony, I went to a different version with a switchable clipping section so that, yes, it has the original D9E Russian germanium diodes from Ukraine shipped to me. It also has a set of just regular germanium diodes that anybody can buy online, and it has the bypass as well for that. So same thing with the chorus. The chorus has the vibes mod, and it also has like it doubles the rate of the chorus, so it is like super spacey, way out there for the
Yeah.
shoegazer guys.
So which one of your pedals are you most proud of so far? Which one do you think would you consider your best?
My favorite is the reverb. What's ironic about that is it's not my circuit at all. It was developed by an online user named Culture Jam in the DIY community. Forrest Whitesides is his name, and he even features my pedal demo on his website as like, here's a video from some guy, which it's one step up from being nobody, right? And I modified it a little bit, and it also has like a damper in it. But that seems to be the pedal that, like, when I sit down to test it, half an hour goes by pretty easily. As far as the one I was most proud of would be the King Klon. Not because of my clever play on words, but I think as far as it's not a cheap pedal because it does take a lot of time to build. Every component I've put in there by myself, every lead I've clipped off, every wire I've routed and tried to make it as neat as I could.
Sure.
Every hole in the enclosure I drilled myself. But the thing about it was, for me, if I ever wanted to try a King of Tone, a real King of Tone, I would have probably had to borrow one or get one of the clones out there because they're about $600 or $700.
Yep.
Same thing for the Colon. So to try to come up with something that, even though it's expensive, it's a huge, huge value. Um, I think any of those two-in-one type designs, Visual Sounds do a lot of those as well. The Jekyll and Hyde and the
I have
there's another one, I
one.
can't think of it,
I have
but
one on
yeah.
my. I have visual sound on my board where you have the chorus and the delay in the same pedal. The thing with pedals like that, though, I do feel that people do want to slim down. Like I know for myself, if I have a choice of going with a big box as opposed to a small box, I'll always try and go to the small box because I can put more stuff on a smaller board and it's less heavy and less cumbersome. So that's one of the reasons why I went with the visual sound one, because I was replacing two pedals with one, and I figured, even though it's still a big box, it's still going to be smaller than if I try and squeeze two of these together with a cable in between. So I ended up doing that. But if I have to buy just one box, I try not to buy the bigger ones. So I don't know if that's something that you're
Mhm.
looking at, maybe for future designs as well.
Yeah, I had wrestled with that even early on last year with the clones. I think my video was called "To Clone or Not to Clone," and I was wrestling with just ethically, do I make copies of it? At the time, I didn't know Bill had restarted building them. So yeah, ethically, I was wrestling with um, do I do I build them or do I not build them? And I just listened to what everybody had to say about it, just to hear their point of view. And then, in addition, from there, if I was going to build them, because I have built different different shapes and sizes of the circuits. Do I build the gold one in like a little bit larger enclosure, or do I build a small one, which I basically in half of my King Klon, there's a whole Klon in there. So I was able
Yeah.
to put that into a 125B box, which would be similar to like a boss size stomp box.
Just going back to the reverb pedal for a moment, because you did say that you're pretty proud of that one. So is that just a spring reverb emulation, or does it do more than just one type of reverb? Maybe you can give me a little bit more better idea of what it is.
So it would be technically considered a digital reverb simulator. Excuse me. However, it's the module that I use is built by Accutronics, who are the company that have built the spring tanks for Ampeg and Fender for years and years out of Korea. And this is their simulator to be able to use that standard and that style of reverb in a very very small footprint. So when that had originally come out, I think it was in 2003 or 2004, just before I got into, sorry, not 2003, 2013 or 2014, just right around the time I had got into building pedals a lot. Um, that was when Forrest Whitesides had decided to, take their data sheet and build a circuit, like a schematic that was set up with the proper levels for input and output of audio signal, like line level signal, like we would use.
So then this pedal is basically still emulating like a spring. Is that right?
It is a spring. It is a spring, but it does sound a little bit different. Like I've got a Fender um, DeVille 410,
Yeah.
the Blues DeVille,
Yeah. Nice.
and it's got a Accutronic string tank in it, and it just has the one knob for reverb. Of course, you can change the actual, you know, EQ knobs on the clean channel, but it doesn't just exclusively change the sound of the reverb itself, the wet side of the reverb. In my pedal, there's one knob that's controlling the blend between the wet and dry signal, which would just be the reverb level, and it's just giving unity gain wherever that's set. The other or the other knob is a damper, so it's actually like a treble cut on the wet signal alone. In addition to that, in the in the wet reverb tails themselves, there's actually a subtle modulation in there too, which it's not as obvious as like a tremolo, but there's a subtle modulation in there too. Like if you run the reverb level and the damper all the way up, you can hear that modulation in there, which it's supposed to be simulating where the in the springs they
As it's
actually start
vibrating.
overrunning each other
Yeah.
and the signals going back and forth in them, and the modulation's there to simulate that. But I just find it so much more pleasant. and so it's not just a dry, stale, super bright um, reverb like a digital reverb, although it is a digital simulator type reverb built off of the PT2399 chips. Um, but it's just I find it really really pleasant because of that simulation of that modulation they put in there. Even if I dial back the damper and the wet side is quite dark, it's just very pleasant. The little guitar room I have here is only about 10 by 12, and it's just a very dry room. But I put that on and close my eyes, and I could play for an hour.
Well,
So nice.
I gotta check that out. It sounds pretty intriguing, if you ask me. I've rarely come across like convincing reverb pedals that were like affordable. Of course, you have like Strymons and all these things where you have to spend you're gonna spend a couple $100 for sure. But I mean, in a small box, just a regular reverb for somebody that has an amplifier with like a head like the Friedman, for example, that doesn't have any reverb in it would be ideal. I've always been very attracted to reverb because I just feel that playing without reverb is like, I don't know, there's just something missing. That it's the fourth dimension that you need. So either reverb or a little slapback echo or something like that is definitely goes a long way in filling up the sound. So what do you think of like pedals like Strymon and what they're doing with like just in terms of, I guess, value to price ratio in terms of what they're putting out?
I mentioned it earlier. Like I've looked at their PCBs and I've looked at some of their circuits. Most of what they're doing is like an analog dry signal mixed with a DSP wet signal, which is pretty smart. They're really popular, obviously, and I think they're quite significant value for how complex they are. But I mean, it's a little bit like comparing a Boeing airliner to a guy building a little ultralight in his backyard, sort of thing. It's like
Sure.
it uh, it's so far out of reach of anything that I would even approach at this point because the technology side of it requires a lot of development. Um, the support side of it, because you're dealing with something that um, I do think the technology they're using, similar to a lot of the other electronics we have these days, is very reliable. But I'm not in a position to have the support infrastructure there
Sure.
for that type of thing.
I understand. Yeah.
Maybe someday, but
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying the analog stuff. Guys have asked me about DSP before. I thought about doing like a DSP thing and just a basic little tube amp, but I mean, like I have a reverb pedal. Why would I put reverb in an amp when I can just build somebody a good amp and give them a real smoking deal on a reverb with the amp?
True. There's a lot of
And then if they don't,
advantage. There's a lot of advantages with going with digital reverbs. I mean, they're not as finicky and not as fragile. But do you think that overall, like things that companies like Strymon or even TC Electronic, they're coming out with tone print technology where they're kind of merging a pedal, just regular pedal electronics with digital software that allow them to do a lot more. Do you think companies coming out with this type of thing will uh, kind of widen the gap between builders like you that are just building good quality pedals without necessarily going the digital side of things? Where do you think where do you think the next 5 or 10 years are going to go for you in terms of just being able to compete with companies like that?
yeah, there's a couple of thoughts I have kind of in that space. Just they talk about in business barriers of entry, and it almost feels like the more technology and the more like programming and the more coding they put into these sort of things, the more they widen that barrier of entry for another competitor to get into their space. So then they dominate that aspect of the market, so to speak. But the back to the whole cell phone thing, it's like I think aside from the personal aspect of doing this as myself, or even if it grew into a group of people together doing this, I think it's just different because I, in junior high or high school, I had done the layaway program on a B9, B9E or something like that, a Boss Roland multi effects pedal, 5 stomps on it,
Yeah.
programmable. First time I had ever heard octave as an effect. Didn't quite understand why it cut in and out like it did, but it was something that I thought at the time, like, this is amazing. The challenge is fast forward 25 years later,
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that would be worth even a fraction of what I paid for it. But when I was, making payments on that back when I was a teenager, that would have been a big chunk of what I had for money. Had I bought a bass or a guitar or even an amplifier, the intrinsic value in that might
Yeah.
have lasted even more significantly. So part of me wonders how that aspect of the industry is going to change over the next 2 to 5 years. I mean, probably within 5 years, it'll change enough that it's completely different again. Um, my pedal, if you can still get power supplies that are just the general Boss 9 volt negative, the standard pedal power supplies there, negative center pin, you could still throw my pedal down the stairs and it's still probably going to work.
That's right.
And
That's right.
it's still worth enough to repair rather than throw it away and buy another one, because that's the other aspect of it. People trying to find cheaper and cheaper cars end up buying cars that only last 4 to 6 years, rather than
Absolutely.
buying something that might be a little more expensive and they can maintain it and get
True.
more use out of it.
But you know what? I'm glad that you took the time to clarify a lot of things about your pedals today. I really do appreciate your time. And I definitely wish you all the success wherever things may lead you in terms of pedal building, even if it's just for your own satisfaction. I mean, you're definitely making waves. There's definitely more and more people talking about your pedals. And, with the Honker, I'm definitely a fan. Maybe I'll check out your reverb pedal next and see how that goes. But I can't wait to do the full review on this guy and put it through its paces with a couple of guitars and amplifiers. But it definitely blows away most of the Tube Screamer style pedals that I've tried. So congratulations on that. I think you're headed in the right direction with it.
Wow, thanks, man. That's really nice of you to say.
So keep up the great work. I expect to see more great pedals coming our way. We need you. All right. Thanks a lot, Tim. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks again for having me on, man. Really
Anytime.
appreciate it.
Anytime.